Well, hi everybody and welcome to BPD Update. This is Chief Steve Strachan. I am your police chief for your police department here in the city of Bremerton, and if you watch the show regularly, you know that this show is all about one thing, and that's letting you know what's going on around the Bremerton Police Department. This month, though, we've got I think a very good show for you, and a very content-rich program for you. We're going to talk about mental health. Talked about that last month, but we have a little different take on it, and it's important stuff to know. We're going to talk about our Crisis Intervention Officer program, or our CIO program, and I'm going to give you just a little bit of information to set the table for you. If you think about mental health and the calls that we respond to as law enforcement, I think anyone can imagine those that relate to mental health, and certainly the most extreme examples, the mass shootings and the things, the intersection of mental health and law enforcement that get a lot of attention, again, are when it intersects with violence, particularly mass violence. But mental health is something we deal with all day, every day, whether it's the person that's having a problem on the street corner who might be homeless. You've probably seen people doing that, shouting at no one in particular on a street corner, to people having problems in their homes, which again is very common as well. And I think people have some concept of how that works, but let me give you just a couple numbers that Officer Tim Garrity provided for me since the beginning of 2015, and we're taping this show just before September. We've had 132 suicidal person calls in the city of Bremerton, so one roughly every other day. We've had 195 mental investigations. So you combine those two together, you're well over 300, and again, more than one a day. If you take a look at the Sheriff's Office, a lot of you viewing this program live in an unincorporated area, Kitsap County, so the Sheriff's Office is your law enforcement jurisdiction. They've had 135 suicidal person calls since the beginning of the year, 182 mental investigations. So let's extrapolate that a little bit with money. Obviously, when we talk about mental health, you're talking about people's family members and human beings, so it doesn't always apply to money, but just to give you an idea, if you figure $1,800 for an emergency room trip, roughly that's the cost of an average emergency room trip, $1,800, and somebody's paying that money, whether it be the federal government, health insurance, or individuals. $1,800 per ER trip, that comes up just in the city of Bremerton, this is not including the rest of the county, just the city of Bremerton, $237,000 in suicidal people admitted to the ER. $280,000 if you figure that 80% of those mental investigations or mental health investigations go to the emergency room as well. So you're talking well over $500,000 just in the city of Bremerton, just since the beginning of this year in 2015. We're not all the way through the year yet, in costs, direct and indirect costs. So it's money, it's people, it's violence, it's people's safety, it's a whole lot of things, and it's really at the center of our job in law enforcement right now. So that's a long introduction to sort of set the table about why this matters. Crisis intervention officers have been discussed for well over a year, almost 2 years in this county. All the departments are working together, and our guest this month on BPD Update is Officer Tim Garrity. He is a veteran officer, a very respected officer with our department, and as both the chief and as a Bremerton resident, I'm very, very thankful that he is putting some of his time into being one of our crisis intervention officers. He's a very good one along with other officers that we have. So first of all, welcome, Tim.
Hi.
And my first question is, again, the CIO program, the Crisis Intervention Officer program, has been in existence now. We did a program about it when it started many months ago. So it's up and running now. So can you talk a little bit about what is the CIO program, and then how's it developed?
Well, the CIO program, we've used a lot of officers from different agencies to hold training, and we've got training from Kitsap Mental Health. We do advanced CIT training. Okay, we do advanced CIT training with other agencies. We've had speakers from the FBI, places like that, come in and talk to us. The goal is that what we really want to do is we want to take the person that's in mental crisis and get them from the situation they're in to a situation where we can get them help. That's really our goal. So when we show up on scene, you want to be, we're trying to de-escalate this situation, and whatever their mental crisis is, we may not be able to, we're not clinicians and we're not doctors and we're not psychologists. We're not going to be able to diagnose your family member has X or Y or Z type issue, but we can hopefully de-escalate the situation and get them to somebody that can help them. Mm-hmm. We also meet regularly probably every 6 weeks or so, we get together and we compare notes, because these people, a lot of the mental health individuals, can be very transient. They'll be living in Paulsville one time, they'll be living in Bremerton after that, they'll be living in Port Orchard. So between the agencies, we can share the information. And also what we've done is we've gone to the point where when you sign in on our computer data terminals in our cars, where we list additional equipment, yes, I have a portable breath tester, or I have spike strips, we can also list that we're a CIO, which the agencies do. So the dispatcher knows that if there's a mental health crisis that's in Paulsville and maybe there's nobody working that day up north, they can readily pull it up on their screen and say, yeah, I have a CIO in Bremerton, or I have 2 CIOs in Bremerton, I have 1 in Port Orchard, I have 1 in the county, so that hopefully one of us can respond to that location to help deal with this person in a mental crisis.
I'm just going to, as you're talking about this, Tim, it really strikes me, and I've been a police officer for almost 30 years. It goes fast, but it shows how law enforcement has changed, and I know it has in your career as well. You're a veteran as well. And you're talking about the dispatch center will list sort of skill sets or tools that we have. And there was once a time when it was SWAT team member, Spanish speaker, certain, sniper. Back in Minnesota when I worked there, we had snipers. And that old saying about if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. To expand our toolbox, which is what the CIO program is really all about, is to expand our toolbox outside of what we're normally doing. Talking about people in crisis, I think we're hearing somebody in our lobby in crisis, but the expansion of that toolbox is an important element of how we begin to. Do you want to go ahead and take care of this? Is this something we need to do?
Yeah, we can.
That guy is hacked.
So just to explain a little bit about, we actually had to stop taping this program as Tim and I were talking. This room that we're taping in is just off of our main lobby. And we started to hear some shouting and some interaction between an individual and a couple of our officers. And Tim turns and looks out the window and says, oh yeah, that's an individual I've dealt with several times as a CIO. So, a very real world example of exactly what we're talking about. And a couple of other officers who are also familiar with this individual helped to deal with him and to de-escalate it, and it's exactly what we're just talking about. And the tools and the CIO program gives us more tools to deal with different kinds of situations. Talk a little bit, if you would, Tim, about the individual that was just in our lobby and created kind of a disturbance, and our officers dealt with it. As a CIO, as a person with mental health issues, as a CIO, how has that kind of changed the way that you deal with that?
Well, the biggest thing is being a CIO and dealing with mental illness is that, first of all, you have to slow down. You have to slow down. There's usually no big hurry on, as far as some immediate thing that I immediately need to do. And a lot of times mental health patients have, it takes a while to get them, they can't comprehend what you're saying, or things like that.
It changes perception.
Yeah.
They're not stupid, it's just different perception.
Right, and a lot of times in a situation like what we just had here in the lobby, the gentleman was in here and he's yelling, and he's obviously mad today, okay? He's mad because the other day he had gotten arrested out of the hospital, after threatening a staff member. But he's obviously upset, he's obviously mad, okay? And if you looked 20 years ago when I started doing this, there would have been 6 cops out here, they'd have pinned him down, and they'd have drug him out of here. That's just,
And if I can just interject, and I know you've had a similar experience, there was once the day in our job, and I did it many times, we would call it's a mental. You have to go deal with a mental. And what did you do? You got in their face, and the mode of operation was see the problem, deal with the problem, solve the problem, do it quickly, get free, deal with it as quickly as possible. The opposite of what you just described. Don't take your time, do it quick. Get on top of them and use physical force if you have to, and do it now. And exactly really the wrong way to deal with individuals with mental health problems, but that's what we did for so many years, and it shows the change that the CIO program has helped to bring about.
Yeah, that you can't necessarily force the issue all the time. Like this, they came out, they talked to him for a minute, he was mad, he was yelling, and then he decided he said what he needed to say, and he was going to go out the door. Okay, and out the door he goes. That's very common when we're dealing with the mental illness. And we also run into a problem that's kind of interesting, is that, people expect you to be able to do things, and we run into things like the Involuntary Treatment Act. For me to take someone, they have to be a danger to themselves, they have to be a danger to others, or they have to be gravely disabled. For me to say, you are coming with me no matter what. Okay, so that becomes a very big issue too.
So let me ask this question, and I get this question from folks in public quite frequently. A person has an adult son or daughter who may have mental health issues, maybe they're living in the home, and they may say certain things, do certain things, and they'll often say, why don't the police come and take them away? Why aren't they forced to go into treatment? It is, and I'm asking your opinion, do you think in this state that the law as it certainly stands, or as it currently stands, and you mentioned, a person has to be a danger to themselves or others, has to be has to be clearly demonstrated. Do you think the law makes it too hard to take people in involuntarily for treatment?
I do think that it does. I think that as far as the involuntary treatment thing, one of the things I've seen is, where citizens, the parents or the people, the adults that they live with, they could petition the court, and the court could issue an order. I think that's reasonable. I don't think it's reasonable for everybody to be like, oh I'm tired of my ex-wife, come take her away. No, that's not going to happen.
Right.
But I think there should be a method where they can do that, because otherwise we're kind of stuck in, I can't take them. They're not a danger to themselves. And you have to understand too that we have to look at it in the immediacy. While I'm standing there, are you a danger to yourself?
Correct.
Not, 2 days ago you said you were going to.
Right.
That's not going to help.
And it's an opinion that's shared by a lot of law enforcement and just a lot of individuals out there that deal with people in different levels of mental illness. I've worked in another state, and I can tell you that I think a lot of people's perspective of involuntary treatment, of institutionalization, is formed by One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Hollywood, and sort of this vision of, all those people they should never be there. No one should ever be institutionalized. Some people need to be institutionalized. They really do. And again, that's not for me to decide. That's for doctors to decide. But we have to have the mechanisms to get there. And again, that's an unsolicited opinion, but one that really I think is something that I think people should work on. Let's get back to the CIO program for a second. Tim, can you share with me any success stories? Something that's maybe a specific example with you or another officer who's a CIO that you've seen this training create a better outcome?
Probably one of the more interesting examples as far as recently was last week when I was working. We had a young lady over on the east side of town. She was, it's an upstairs downstairs type apartment, or upstairs downstairs house. So the downstairs is its own apartment, and all the windows are glass, because it's like a walkout basement type deal. Well, we get a call from the upstairs that the lady downstairs is holding a knife to herself. So we go out there, and and I've been there before. She's had some mental health issues in the past, and I'm standing there, and we obviously we bring some tools that we may or may not, hopefully we don't need, but we do bring tools. And I started talking to her, and at the same time I'm talking to one of our other fellow CIOs, Officer Shaw. He's on the phone getting a hold of KMH, finding out, are there triggers, are there things
kids have mental health,
yes. Are there things that work, are there things that don't work, what kind of treatment history do we have that we can share, and there's HIPAA laws, there's things that, they're not going to tell us, but, not because they don't want to, because of the laws, but we're trying to, so we're trying to get all the information together that we can get together. And I talked to her for probably 35 or 40 minutes. And she's moving from one room to the other. The good thing is that she has the lights on inside and it's dark outside, so I can watch her moving around. And she'd hold the knife out, and then she'd hold it up to her neck, and she'd hold the knife back out. But we kept talking and kept talking and kept talking, and she finally says, well, hey, I'm only, we had got aid to show up and all that kind of stuff, so we got medical aid and all that in case something does go badly. She says, well, I'll only go to the hospital with a fireman, so I have them send me the, two of the paramedics from up on, they're parked at the end of the driveway. They come down, I'm like, they're right here, So we finally convinced her to put the knife down, come on outside, and we'll take her to the hospital. And, for the most part, that worked. I mean, we got her outside, we got her up there,
And there are, it's not a matter of either or, everything works or everything doesn't. Everything's a process. But again, going back to, these are tools that we didn't always have. And again, it's because of the good work of our CIOs that really helps us out. Very quickly, we're almost out of time, Tim. The website, we now have a website up. It's kitsapcit.org, and anyone can go to that website. It has information about the CIO program, crisis intervention training. It has one of the most important elements is resources. Can you talk a little bit about that, Tim?
This resource pamphlet was put together by Sergeant Zimba out on Bainbridge Island. And he managed to get this done. And if you look, it says how to get help. All the agencies have them. We've dropped some off at health agencies. We've dropped some off at teen shelters, things like that. How to get help in Kitsap County. It has lists, things that teenagers can do, immediate responses, families, veterans, and all that. It's also on the website. You can pull up the front cover, which gets you one half, or it says pull up the back half, and that gets the other half. Has all the numbers on it. It's a great resource for people and for their families.
And Tim said it, but I'll say it again. You can get this. Come to our office to get this if you like, but very importantly, it's on the web. If you go to kitsapcit.org, all this information is there, as is all the information on each individual city, including the sheriff's office that's involved in the CIO program. Everything is there. Just access it on the web, or again, stop in and grab one of these. We have Officer Garrity, we have Officer Shaw, Sergeant Meade, Officer Nelson, and Officer Corey is now training up as a CIO. Our CIOs don't get paid anymore. What they get is our thanks, and the fact that they can do their job a little bit better to help this community and to help their fellow officers, and again, the folks who are in need. Officer Garrity, you've been working with us for a very long time, and he is top-notch, as you can tell, and we certainly appreciate his work. Thanks for being with us. All right, we're going to be right back after this. So good information about our Crisis Intervention Officer Program and Officer Tim Garrity. And once again, if you need any information, if you have questions or something that you may want to get more information on, maybe it's a family member or a friend, it's available on our website, or stop down to our office and pick up one of those brochures, whichever is easiest for you. Normally, on the second half of the BPD update, I will go through our statistics and some notable items from our department. Do a little bit differently this month, and I'll tell you why. We're going to actually show you the presentation to our council meeting, or to our council, that we do once a month, and this is the one from the latter half of August of 2015. And the reason that we're going to do it this way is you get a good information on our statistics, an update from our BCAPS, our volunteer program, and most importantly, an update from Chief Al Duke about the gas explosion that I'm sure you all heard about on Kitsap Way at the motel, which occurred in August. And rather than me go through it again, I'm going to have that actually come from the chief himself, Chief Duke from the fire department. So let's go to that. And again, thank you for joining us on BPD Update. Chief Duke and I have spent a lot of time together in the last 2 days after this gas explosion. You know that I like to, in a jovial and a fun way, poke fun at the fire department, but you know that they're our partners, valued partners, and there's nobody that I value more than our friends in the fire service and Chief Duke, and the outstanding work that he and his people do. I've seen it up close. I knew about it, but I've seen it up close for the last 2 days. And I'm very thankful for their safety and for the safety of our people, and for the work that all of them do. So with that, Chief Duke.
Thank you. Ready to turn it on. There we go. Good evening, members of council, and I'd like to thank Chief Strachan for, during the busiest part of the event, he stepped forward and was willing to talk to the press because they were all over the situation. Last night we got a call about 7:54 to a gas leak at the Motel 6 on Kitsap Way, between 11th and Kitsap Way. We initially got there, our first units got there, realized that we could not shut the gas off, and they asked for Cascade Gas to expedite their response. Our response was 2 engines and a duty chief. The one engine pulled up, pulled a line for protection, and then the other engine started, got the manager and started, the manager pulled the alarm to alert the people that there was an issue in the building. Most people ignore that alarm. This case, they didn't ignore it, and we went and along with the police department to evacuate the entire building. We got about 3/4 of the way through the building, and at that time Cascade Gas arrived. Their technician went to look at the meter to see what he could do, went to his vehicle, and then came back with a couple tools and was proceeding to work on the gas meter when the gas meter exploded. He was thrown back about 10 to 15 feet. We had two firefighters about 20 feet away that they were thrown back also from that incident. BPD officers were close to the incident too, but they weren't in the direct area that where the explosion happened. The Cascade worker was then airlifted to Harborview Hospital. We thought he was in a pretty critical condition, but they've downgraded him to a serious condition, and they believe his prognosis should be very good. He does have some severe injuries that he has to overcome. We then were just putting water on what was a pile. If you go to Kitsap Sun's app page, I don't think it's on their web page, there's actually a video where we released when the explosion happened, and you see just the whole building come down in a big pile. And when it came down, the gas was feeding through the pile, and until we could get the gas shut off, we had to let it burn but not let it get into the building. Cascade Gas came, and they had to dig up the street, find the line that fed into the building, and they finally shut the gas off to the building, and then we were able to about 11 o'clock at night finally put the fire out. That started the process then of trying to figure out where everybody in this facility is. And in a motel, it's extremely difficult because it's not like a home, you know who's there, so we have to get the motel manager, we get the drawings of the facility, find out which rooms everybody was, and then track down where those individuals are. There was 16 units that were completely destroyed, so our efforts were made to try and find where those individuals were that potentially were in that room and talk to them directly. A lot of times people make comments that aren't very accurate. Oh, I thought I saw that individual. No, we need to see the individual, we need to talk to the individual, and we need to see if they had anybody else in the room so we can account for everybody in that building. So we had a response from all over Kitsap County. We have a technical rescue team that deals with these issues. Each department puts a small amount of money in and trains 3 individuals from each department, and then they become experts in technical rescues like this. We also had ATF was there. They had a number of officers that came over this morning. National Safety Transportation Board, who's in charge of pipelines, was also heading out this way. When I talked to them from their national office, they were coming out this way too, and they decided after a discussion they weren't going to come. But we had them, and we had the Washington State Utilities Commission bring some experts over, and along with Cascade's experts over. So we spent most of last evening and up until about noon today just checking through to the pile, the police department were checking on individuals, trying to find where these individuals might do, and started the investigation into why this happened. We're continuing to do the investigation. We've shut the site down this evening, about 6 o'clock it'll be shut down. Fence will be put around, and we'll have somebody watch it over the night, and then tomorrow we'll continue on with the investigation with the ATF. So we also had 2 members of the fire department that were close that sustained minor injuries but were evaluated at the hospital. One had a concussion and one had a bruised rib. And if there's any questions, we'll continue on, and I'll give you a briefing when we get more information as we go along.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Does a member of our council have a question? Mr. Younger.
Yes, Chief Duke, I have a question.
If I could, Council President, can I have the Chief walk through a couple of pictures here just to kind of show you
I'm
what the scene
not
looks like?
qualified in this device,
Sorry.
so he has to do
Sorry.
it for me.
There you go.
So here's the site. It's hard to. This is from the parking lot if you were in the parking lot if you were at Burger King, looking into the site, and as you look to the left, that building went over 3 more units and came out 2 units, and those units are completely gone. They're in a pile that's there, and it's a similar view looking from the car wash down. You're looking into that pile, and you see all the firefighters there starting to go through the rubble and try and find it. And you'll see a big excavator there. We used that to pick up the big pieces or the big particles that we couldn't do by hand and just move them out of the way. But most of the evening was done with buckets and shovels and kind of digging through and making sure what we find and putting out the fire. So any questions?
Mr. Younger.
Yes, Chief Duke, when did they actually shut the gas off to the motel?
It was, when was that? The explosion happened about 8:24. It was probably about 2 hours after that. And the reason is the first technician that came was injured. So we had to call for a second team to come and shut the gas off. And it's not like you go over and shut a valve off. We had to find where the line was in the street. We kind of knew where the street was. Then they had to get a backhoe and dig up the gas line.
That's what I thought when I saw the overhead news coverage. I thought I saw a backhoe, and I was just puzzled because, well, we all understand we have a gas connection go to our house, and there's a shutoff valve. It's on or off, right? We understand that, and obviously you can't approach that. But you would think there would be a built-in redundancy, so further down the line there'd be another valve where you can just shut it off. But there apparently is not. No, there's no valves like that. And then I thought, well, isn't there some master thing? We could just shut the gas off to the whole city to save lives. But
so this is not the first time that we've had incidents like this. There's actually a 12-inch gas line that runs into the shipyard, and it's under 1,200 PSI. Normal house was about 4 or 5 PSI. And they put a tine through that, and you could hear that for miles. And we asked, are you going to shut the line down? They said, very rarely do we ever shut the line down, because once you shut the line down, everybody's pilot lights go out.
Right.
And then they have to come back and light everybody's pilot lights. And so very rarely do they ever shut the entire system down. They try and shut the line out to the building that's being affected.
So in this case, that's your only option, is to shut basically the whole city down, or dig up a pipe and then cut it, and then find an area in the pipe and then carefully cut it and cap it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's another, if you have a gas leak in your home, it's very important that you call somebody to get that gas leak checked out, even a small gas leak in your house. And there's a difference between natural gas and propane gas. Natural gas goes high, it's lighter than air. Propane gas goes down. So if you have propane in your house, it could go in your basement or your sub area, and you could get an explosion from there too.
Quick thing, I mean, just the same questioning. I assume Cascade Natural Gas provides information to its ratepayers about safety, especially the shutoff, because you could use the wrong tool, cause a spark potentially if you have a leak at the meter. Mm-hmm. And so I know you're going to investigate the specific cause of this explosion. But is there anything that the fire department does to educate our citizens or residents about safety, gas safety, natural gas safety? And
actually, on Cascade's website, they've got a good website that talks about safety. They have a whole section on safety, and we've actually trained people through DEM. If you're in a neighborhood watch, that's one of the trainings on how to shut your gas off, and so. It's pretty simple, but if you don't know how to do it during an emergency, it's not the time to learn how to do it.
Thank you.
Chief, any word on the two folks that were unaccounted for?
Yes, everybody's been, they're not in the pile. So we've looked through the pile. There's still two individuals one individual we have not spoken to, but we know they're not in the pile. And so they're out there. There was actually this morning one individual wasn't even in the area, called and said, hey, I am out of the area, so I was in the motel to let us know. So it's difficult in a hotel because there was a lot of shipyard contractors there. They could be over somewhere else for the evening. They could be anywhere else in the area, and so they're hard to get a hold of.
Wow. Ms. Dowds?
I just want to say, times like this, how appreciative we are of our police and our fire department, because the response time for both you guys were great as far as responding to this incident. I happened to be in that same area at the same time. It was quite interesting. So I appreciate, thank you for all you guys have done.
And I've heard many of you have felt and heard the explosion, and we've got reports all the way over to Port Orchard who heard the explosion when it went off. Thank you.